Hi, this is Doug at thewalledgarden.net. You know, in Tolstoy's War and Peace, there's a character by the name of Andrei Bolkonsky. He's a prince. He's part of the aristocracy. And later in the story, he becomes a soldier and so on. But the thing that gets my attention is the idea that Bolkonsky is a very serious, a very cynical man who's wrestling with the idea of life and death in his life. He's trying to decide whether life is worth living or not, or whether he should, when the opportunity arises, just to allow himself to die, to be killed. Because he's a soldier, and so he's set in these circumstances where he comes through a crossroads of threat or risk, and where most of the people are, when they're faced with that crossroads, either flee for their lives or, become very disturbed and overwhelmed. He runs into the risk itself because he doesn't mind putting his life at risk. He doesn't mind putting his life on the line. And so he's looked upon as a hero because he gets into a battle and then runs forward, saves the day, and so on. But he's really not heroic, and this is what Tolstoy is getting to the point. Bolkonsky really isn't heroic. He simply doesn't care whether he lives or dies because life isn't that valuable to him. And so the point is he eventually dies from wounds that he received in battle. But the point is that he followed his personal instinct in life. You see, his value system, the inclination or tendency he had in his heart to, when he's faced with a decision, when he's faced with a crisis, he puts himself at risk in that situation. I think what this does, what Tolstoy does in this situation, and he brings up a Christian issue that I think is really important. And that is that when Bolkonsky is faced with this choice of life and death, and he chooses death, there are many people in life who, when they're faced with the same choice, they choose life. They choose to try to do whatever it takes to survive. In fact, we call them survivors, you see, and we are amazed at the ends they will go to survive. Maybe you've seen people who were sick, deathly sick, and they will go through horrendous procedures and go to great ends to survive at whatever cost they can. Now, that is a personality trait as well. You can't say that Bolkonsky's is noble, more noble than the others, or you can't say that the survivor is more noble than Bolkonsky. You see, it's just a personality trait. We have an instinct, a tendency, one way or another along those lines. And so for the Christian, we are consistently encouraged not to follow our personal tendencies, not to simply make decisions that are based on our personal longings or the personality traits that we have, but we're to go to God and ask Him what He wants us to do. It's like Paul said, whether I live or die, it makes no difference. If I die, I'm going to go be with Christ. If I live, I'm going to help you out. It makes no really difference which way, if I live or die, either way, I'm Christ's, however that works out. And that's what the bottom line is for the Christian, is that when we're faced with a decision, whatever that decision. It can be a dramatic decision or it can be a mundane decision. It can be something within our personal relationships. It could be at our work. It could be at our church. Even in our recreation, we can make a decision on whether we're going to follow our personal instinct or whether we're going to seek out what it is that God wants us to do in this situation. And there's going to be a variety of things that God's going to lead us to. You can't turn to other people and get that cue from them. You have to get that from God, because any personal tendency is, what would we call it? It's missing the point. You can't take one person's personal tendency. You can't look at a survivor, for instance, and make that a noble thing and hold that up as the template for everyone to live by. And you can't hold up Bolkonsky's tendency to choose death in whatever the situation. Even though we're not talking about suicide here, we're talking about getting out of here as soon as possible. And I think those often are held up as the ideal. One of them is held up by ideal by different groups, and neither is the ideal. The real ideal is to go and find out what God wants us to do. And you see, he may take Bolkonsky, and he may say to Bolkonsky, what I want you to do is survive this battle. And after this battle, I have a task for you to do. And so it would be heroic, you see, for Bolkonsky to keep living, because it's such a struggle for him to do. On the other hand, he may say to the survivor, I want you to sacrifice yourself in this situation. I want you to go ahead and die in this situation. That would be very difficult, and that would be heroic for them, you see. And oftentimes we can't see the heroism another person is going through, because they're following what God wants them to do. And so, this doesn't apply just to dramatic things. As we look at social events and social unrest around us, and I hear survivalist kind of mentality of saying, I'm going to protect everything that's mine and my people at all costs, and we're going to survive this thing. And other people are saying, I hope I'm at ground zero when the bomb goes off, or whatever. Those are all personality longings. The real issue for the Christian is that we need to come to a place where we are deferring to him, where we say, I know it, you can pray and you can ask him, please, would you do this thing that I value? Would you have me pass out of this life as soon as possible? Or would you have me survive this thing no matter what? We can pray that, but we come to a place of deference before him. And we need to pray for the ability to stand up under that deference, because it may be a very difficult thing that he asks us to do. We just don't know what that is, you see, until the situation arises. We need to work on it in a mundane way, in an everyday way, and typically, I think, like everything else, the more we practice it in the everyday, the more it becomes automatic when the crisis arises. And so, for the Christian, we are neither a survivalist nor are we like Bolkonsky. You see, we have these tendencies, but we're to just block those out from our lives and go to God and find out what it is that he wants us to do. Because in the day of judgment, that's what we're going to be judged on, is whether we followed instructions, whether we followed what he wanted us to do. And we need to find out what that is, and we need to practice that on a daily basis. And so we're not a people who are to choose life or death. We're to choose God and let him lead us into the thing that he wants us to do in that situation. Well, I encourage you to come out of the world system, step off of the conveyor belt, come up for air, and take a breath from God.